Sheba said, in our culture, we know the power of creating wealth for the next generation.
Mm.
So what we do is we'll sit down with the parents and we'll bring all the children together and we'll write everybody in the household. So let's say you've got some older parents and you got retired parents and you got adult children. We'll write everybody. When those parents pass, we put more money on the oldest siblings and keep passing it down, because through the magic of paper, ink, we're creating wealth that's guaranteed, because we're guaranteed. Good Lord's calling you home. That's a wrap. That's a guaranteed deal.
Right.
Now, how you go home, that's another conversation. You could take that up with your clergy guest. But what I would tell you is, financially, a lot of our counterparts in other immigrant groups and things of that nature are passing wealth along using savings, using selling their business and handing it off, or using life insurance and those other tools. And then the really wealthy are just using the life insurance to pay the taxes on all the other wealth that they're going to pass.
Hey, what's up? What's up? Welcome to another episode of Strategic Moves. I'm your host, Ken Dow. This is a place where I bring art, culture, politics, and business all together, and I do it every Sunday on this channel. On today's program, we're going to take the time to talk a little bit about financial literacy, and we're going to talk about financing in itself and how you can do better at your financing, how you can grow as a business doing financing, and some of the steps that my next guest took to get him to that place. And today on our program, we have none other than Mr. Anthony Peoples.
Hey, what's happening?
Hey, we want to welcome Anthony Peoples to us. Anthony Peoples is with Case Western Reserve, and he's the director of Diversity Achievement Corporate Relations. And prior to doing that, I had met Mr. Peoples years ago, him and his lovely wife, years and years ago. We've been doing this a long time in this town. And when I met him, he was an insurance guy. You were selling insurance, I think it was.
I did something before that.
I think you probably was doing something before that. So, Mr. Peoples, I want to welcome you to our program again, brother. Thanks for coming. We appreciate you showing up today and giving us the time to drop some information that may help some of our people here. This podcast was set up for me to bring in individuals like yourself to come in and talk about your life experiences and some of the things that help you become the big man in this town that you are today. So I'm hoping that you'll use this time to enlighten us and drop some bombs for some of these people out here who's listening to this program today.
Well, first of all, I'm honored. I do listen to your podcast, so I'm humbled to be amongst some of the other guests that you've had. I don't know how big a man I am. I need to lose some weight, but I would tell you that just an opportunity to try to share some of the successes and how you learn from failures to help others. So I appreciate you having this platform. And I like the fact that you're cutting across all different types of important aspects of our community. Like, as you said, the arts, the culture, the business side, the politics, of course, that's where I met you, learning to do field work in politics and raise money for politics.
Exactly.
But you're much more than that. So I appreciate the efforts that you're putting together.
Oh, no problem. No problem, man. It's just a thing that I've realized that, as we got older, that we have bunch of experience under our belts. We've helped a lot of people. We've helped ourselves. And most importantly enough, like everyone, I tell everybody on time, I definitely learned more from my failures than my successes.
Absolutely.
So my failures is what helped put me to where I'm at now. And it's kind of easier now. I sit back now and look at it and just like, damn, I remember the days when we was grinding, doing it. Now you got old, you got gray beard, you're getting old, and kids getting older. Life seems to be a little bit more easy, but it wasn't always easy, man. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and how we got to where you are today. So, and basic fashion, with anybody that comes on my program, we got to start from the very beginning. So you're from Cleveland.
Yeah, I grew up in the Lee Harvard community in Cleveland on 155th Street. My dad came here from Raleigh, North Carolina, and he went to Central State University in the 1950s. My mom, who was a Central State grad as well, and then I came along, and so they settled down in the community. They were both school teachers. Dad was a shop teacher at Glenville, and John F. Kennedy did what they called at that time industrial arts.
Yeah, I remember industrial arts.
Exactly.
Right.
My mother was a health and phys ed teacher as well, so they really believed in education for my sister and I. So we were fortunate at those times because, the community kind of wrapped their arms around us. And I know we have some aspects of that. I don't want to sound too nostalgic, but we did have a really good community. We were ordinary folks that looked out for each other. My sister and I got a really good education. We created some opportunities for ourselves and started to build our careers to help others. I went to the Cleveland schools until 7th grade, and I got an opportunity to go to university school, and I graduated from there and got lucky and got into Duke University.
Okay.
I was going to study law. So I
Mhm.
was pre-law. I'm a political science major.
Mhm.
But during the summer, which is kind of the first perfect point of what I think is important, I got the exposure to banking through summer jobs, through
Mhm.
summer internships at the old Ameritrust Bank.
Yeah, I
You're
remember
old enough to
Ameritrust.
remember
Yeah.
Ameritrust, which is
Right.
now a long time a merger with KeyBank years ago. And the
Mhm.
rest is kind of history. So I
Right.
spent 25 years of my career in commercial banking,
Mhm.
part of that with Ameritrust, and then most of that with Fifth Third Bank, where I ran their public finance group. I used to finance cities, school districts, colleges, hospitals, major
Mhm.
works. And that led to some other doors to open up for me. But it was all because of a good foundation, parents that believed in education, pushed us hard,
Mhm.
didn't let us have any excuses
Mhm.
for not being successful.
So you say you went to university school. What was that like back then?
Well, it was interesting because it was the mid 70s when I
Mhm.
matriculated there. And the brothers that were there at the time, we were like the second generation because there was some pioneers before us.
Because I know it wasn't many
There
brothers
wasn't
coming
many
out of
brothers
there,
there, right?
right?
Exactly.
And not to mention the fact that it's just had a reputation of being a really strong academic school.
Yeah,
So,
it was strong academic, but it was competitive in athletics and
mhm.
well-rounded. Challenge with going into an environment like that is how do you learn how to take advantage of the environment? Because
Mhm.
it wasn't perfect.
Mhm.
There was certainly the things that we talk about now in diversity, like bias and race, and all
Mhm.
that had an impact at
Mhm.
US. But those of us who embraced it and we realized that we had a great opportunity,
Mhm.
we took advantage of it. And we
Mhm.
got us into great schools, got us good scholarships to go to college. Some of the brothers that were athletes took advantage of that as
Mhm.
well.
Mhm.
And so it was a good environment. It wasn't a perfect environment. There
Okay.
were challenges, but I'm a real champion for US because I
Mhm.
know what a difference it made in my life.
Mhm.
So now I'm a trustee. I'm on the trustee board, and I've
Mhm.
chaired. I'm the immediate past president of the Alumni Association,
Mhm.
and I'm chairing the annual fund this year. So I raise money for US.
Mhm.
One of my proudest moments is I established a Black alumni dinner that we do every year,
Okay.
where we bring Black alumni back throughout all the decades from the 70s to now, come back to US to talk about our experiences, to give back to the school, and to try to make sure that we keep the school accountable,
Mhm.
if you will, making sure that more young boys of color get that experience. So we're real keen on that.
I was thinking that you would say that school was a big contributor in how you got into Duke. I would say.
Oh, absolutely. I don't know how I got into Duke, but I think
Yeah.
US was part of it. I
Mhm.
think going to a competitive school like US opened up that door.
Mhm.
And so I got down, and I wasn't the best student, but I was a good student.
Mhm.
Finished in 4 years and came back
Okay.
to Cleveland to start my banking career. But US definitely made the difference. What I learned is if you apply yourself wherever you go, you
Mhm.
really got to apply yourself. And my father used to always say, keep your goal before you. Because if you
Mhm.
know where your goal is, then you can figure out how you're going to use your time to get to that goal.
Mhm.
And you can cut away the distractions. That's hard when you're a kid, but that's a lesson I keep learning.
Mhm.
And
That
again,
being.
even at age 60 now, I'm still
Mhm.
learning that
Mhm.
lesson. Keep my goal before me and allow myself to channel my energy where I need to be, and
Mhm.
allow kind of the superfluous stuff and the stuff that I don't need to be spending time on to kind of push that to the side.
So how was it going to Duke?
Duke was interesting because Duke was very white.
Had to be back then,
I
right?
think my class out of 12 or 1300 students was only 50 or 60 African American
Really?
students.
Okay.
So the bad news, it was a small group of African American students. The good news is we became a very close knit unit.
Mhm.
And a couple of the brothers were athletes on the football team, basketball team, but the rest were just students in engineering and sciences and
Mhm.
math, pre-med and pre-law. I was pre-law at the time and
Mhm.
decided to go into banking. One of the things that we did though, and we're still a close cohort today, is we became like this wave. When we graduated, we started fighting. We established the Duke University Black Alumni Connection.
Okay.
And we began to do two things. One, recruit more Black students and faculty to Duke, because
Okay.
we wanted to increase the number of Black faculty at Duke. So when we met young PhDs and folks that were going that route, we said, well, you ought to really come down to North Carolina, consider teaching at Duke.
Mhm.
We're going to make enough noise that there's opportunities for you.
Mm.
And then secondly, we raised money,
Mhm.
because we always felt that we know that this society is a capitalistic society. So if we're raising money, then we have a seat at the table, we have a voice.
Mhm.
So obviously, many of my classmates are much more successful today than we were then.
Mhm.
But in the early 90s, when we formed the Duke University Black Alumni Connection, which is now called the Duke Black Alumni.
Oh, so you guys actually started.
Yeah, we started it because we had this experience of, wow, there's only 50 of or 60
Right.
of us in the class, right? What's
Right.
going on? Y'all didn't recruit anybody in
Right.
1981? And so now Duke has a 10 or 12% Black student
Okay.
population,
Mhm.
faculty, not in every discipline. In most
Mhm.
disciplines, African American faculty may be 12 to 13, 12 to 15%. So there's a good, strong cohort. Now, there's still battles to be fought.
Mhm.
It's still a Southern majority university, but
Mhm.
they are aware that we're a presence there and we make a difference. So we just mourn the loss of, I think, the fourth of the fifth original, we call them the first five, the original black alumni, black undergrads that got to Duke in the 60s. And there's only one still living, I believe. There was five, and they got there in 1963. And they were the pioneers. So just like you, there's this wave before you. So you always have to be looking back and understanding the folks that kind of cracked the door open for you, pushed the door before you open the door, because they made sacrifices that made your path a little bit easier. Right. So I experienced that being in like the second generation of Black boys at US. And now as an alum, I can appreciate that. And some of our older Black alumni still come back to my Black alumni dinner. And man, it's just, you're just in all these guys that, how did you even survive this? And same with Duke. And I'm sure others who have had experiences when they're in a majority institution like that, we're breaking down some barriers. At the time, we were just mad because there's not enough of us. We're like, what's wrong with this picture?
You're a Kappa, right?
I am a Kappa.
Did you pledge there at Duke?
I did pledge at Duke. I'm an initiative of the I to Z chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi. I'm a legacy. My dad pledged at the Delta Zeta chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi in 1952 at Central State University. Okay. And it's kind of full circle because he left North Carolina in the 50s because a place like Duke wouldn't have admitted a Black student. Now, there were historically Black colleges in North Carolina, land-grant colleges, HBCUs. But he decided to come to Central State in Ohio, join KSI at Central State. And so when I went to Duke, he said, well, you can pledge anything you want, but if you don't come home a Kappa, I'm not going to send you back to school. So you have to do it on your own. So proud legacy. A lot of the things I've done is because he was a good role model and wasn't a perfect man, but he was certainly a man that was intentional and on purpose. So our chapter was established it was chartered in 1979. So I was on like the second or third line.
Yeah, you say, right.
Duke in 81. And I'm so proud of these brothers now because they're all the young brothers that pledge Kappa now and the other Greeks. We have all the Divine Nine there now. Okay. Whereas then we only had, we had Kappas, we had Alphas, and we had Omegas, and we had the Deltas and AKs, but we only had 5 of the 9. Wow. So now there's a full complement there's enough critical mass of Black students now that we have all of the Divine Nine. And when we go back for our reunions with the brothers, and the other Greeks do too, because my friends who are in other Greek, it's still a legacy. It's still looking back, and they appreciate us, but we really more appreciate the young folks because of what they're doing and how they've stood on our shoulders. But they're really taking it to the next level.
So was you growing up that type of kid who was saving money and all of that? Wasn't because of getting into banking and all?
I was not a money guy. I was a guy that was interested in law and business and a little bit of politics. I was always a student leader on campus, a student leader at US. And so I thought I would go that route. But once again, exposure. Exposure is so important. And I fight for this for my daughters to give them exposure to different things. So my dad ran the co-op program at Glenville. What that meant is at that time, whether you were college bound or not college bound, you may be going to the trades or going, at that time, there was real good factory jobs. You could go to work at Lincoln Electric, build a career, or Warner and Swayze and some other companies that maybe you and I remember that most don't remember. So he had this co-op program where he and some of the other teachers would teach a half a day and the students would work half the day. And then they would go work with companies. And
OWE.
OWE there, exactly. So he ran OWE, Operation Work Experience. And so he had connections and relationships, right? Relationships important with some of the human resource people at the different companies who were hiring the students from Glenville and then later John F. Kennedy when he moved over there. So he said, man, I ought to get my son a job. So he called the folks at Cleveland Trust, which had just converted to Ameritrust, and said, can I get my son a summer job just so he can get some experience? So my first summer, I unloaded Brinks trucks and I was in the cash vault counting money.
Oh, that's sweet.
And I didn't know much about money. I'd had a little savings account and, I'd do chores and my parents would give me money. I think I may have had a paper route or something, but I was never a money guy. Long story short, that was my first experience. I was 16. I got the work permit and I was able to go downtown on the rapid transit, catch the bus, catch the rapid, go downtown, work at Ameritrust and come home and save my money. My father said, "Well, save part of it, buy yourself some clothes for the school year, this, that, and the third." Then when I went to Duke, I had worked a couple summers at Ameritrust. So then I was eligible for their college intern program. So then I got a little bit more sophisticated job.
And what was the college intern program?
That was a program to expose college students to different careers in banking. So it was a more of a formalized program.
So you wasn't just a teller. They had you doing.
I started to get interested in the world of finance and how it impacted everything. How, whether you're a business or a nonprofit, a large corporation or a small business or a household, the financial components of that were very important. Then I remember back growing up and watching my dad take a legal pad and draw a line down the middle. So here's my paycheck, and here's all my bills, and here's how much we're going to save to go to college and pay for school. My sister went to Regina High School, and I went to US, as I said before. My father worked at night at Tri-C teaching blueprint reading, mechanical drawing, and pay for US because I didn't get a scholarship. And he taught me some discipline around meeting my obligations. He didn't have a fancy investment strategy because he didn't know much about that. And talked about it at our dinner table. But he felt that if I got exposed to something like banking, it would open up some doors. And I really didn't plan to be a banker even after I graduated from Duke. I took the LSAT, did well. I was going to go to law school, but I said, well, let me just work a couple years at Ameritrust, just take a break from school, get some money, buy some suits. I wanted to go out, give me a little car. You know, you're 22, 23. That turned into 30 years.
Banking back then, and it still is today, fine. It was a very, very respectable patient. Absolutely. I mean, just like you said, along with the doctors, lawyers, and that financing was right there. Like you say, nice suits.
Right. Nice suit, car, working downtown.
Downtown.
Had a little title.
Businessman, right. You know,
guy,
so it was there.
Absolutely.
You know, I think the one thing that's ringing clear in our discussions of that is the family that you had with your mom and dad. If you didn't talk a lot about financing or, like you say, investments, but you saw how they sat down and had to figure that out.
Right.
And then figuring that out, that was able to get you and your sister into really good schools. And,
absolutely.
And wouldn't cheat.
No, not at all.
They wouldn't cheat.
My sister ended up going to Bowling Green, and she has a master's from University of North Carolina, and she's an entrepreneur. She has her own consulting practice down in Raleigh. And so our parents shared with us what they knew.
Correct.
And then they said the rest of it's hard work, no excuses, and things of that nature. The banking experience opened up a lot of doors because there's a couple of careers where you can get into everybody's stuff. One is banking, the other is law, probably the ministry. So you can just talk to everybody, or politics. You're a political operative. So those are folks that get to talk to everybody. So I was never like an accounting major. I wasn't a business numbers guy per se, but I knew how to open up doors. I knew how to sell concepts. I knew how to sell intangibles. I knew how to build relationships that brought business into the bank. So I built a real skill around selling and a real skill around helping organizations and individuals identify what the problem was, what the pain point was, and then finding that through the financial tools that are out there. So when I started out in banking, I did it. Then when I moved and became a financial planner and advisor for 10 years, I was also able to solve problems. So I enjoyed the fact that the resources of the bank could solve problems. I also saw that deals were getting done and access to capital, even though we didn't talk about this back in the 80s, was so important because the opportunity can be in front of you, but if you don't have the resources to take advantage of the opportunity, and that's in every field. So I like the fact that banking touched every field. So whether I was talking to a nonprofit or I used to finance churches, I used to finance all kinds of things or big corporations. So after that, I just said, well, this is for me.
So you went into financial planning.
Well, I went into financial planning later. I've spent 25 years in the commercial banking area. Then in 2008, decided I wanted to try to do some things on my own. So I went over to New York Life and I was a $1 million roundtable agent for them. And then,
now, what is that?
So it's like an award, really. If you hit a certain number, there's a small percentage of agents across the country and the globe that hit a certain amount of production. And they call it the $1 million roundtable. It used to be because you sell $1 million of life insurance 50 years ago. But now it's more, there's some targets and goals that each company sets. And it's a way to incentivize sales because sales is always competitive. And so I was competitive. Wasn't much of an athlete in school, but I played some sports. But I wasn't very good. So I knew that I wasn't going to be able to do much with that. I enjoyed competition. And so what I enjoyed about the sales role, even when I was at third and later with New York Life and then Skylight Financial Group, was the ability to hit a number, hit a goal.
So you were selling life insurance?
I sold life insurance. I sold annuities. I also did financial planning where I would sit down with a client and look at where do they want to go. You're trying to build wealth for retirement. You're trying to build wealth for your children. You're trying to invest in a company. You're trying to monetize your company and sell it for your retirement. I did all that. So I did a lot of planning for business owners. So coming from banking, I had the business side and the insurance side.
So how do a Black man, because it ain't like you, I'm pretty sure you didn't have a big, and I could say this to you, Rolodex of African Americans who you can pull in there, because I even knew some people who got into selling life insurance as, you know, hey, I got my life insurance, I'm going to sell life. But it seemed like it was always to Black folks a creepy thing or something to kind of talk to them about. They didn't want to ever talk about life insurance.
Yeah, we have some skepticism about financial products. Some of it's the lack of exposure. When I joined New York Life and I made the $1 Million Roundtable, I was invited to these meetings where all these other $1 Million Roundtable agents, I may have made a couple $100,000 a year, but there's folks that are making $1 million a year selling life insurance.
Right.
$1 million or more. And so there was an Indian woman who was one of the top agents for the company that year. And so she gave a talk on how she became so successful. Her husband was a vice president with New York Life. He quit just to run her practice. She had a practice in 30 states. So we asked her, well, how did you get so successful? Are all your clients like surgeons? Are they all super wealthy people? She said, no, they're ordinary folks. She said, in our culture, we know the power of creating wealth for the next generation. So what we do is we'll sit down with the parents and we'll bring all the children together and we'll write everybody in the household. So let's say you've got some older parents and you got retired parents and you got adult children. We'll write everybody. When those parents pass, we put more money on the oldest siblings and keep passing it down, because through the magic of paper, ink, we're creating wealth that's guaranteed, because we're guaranteed. Good Lord's calling you home. That's a wrap. That's a guaranteed deal. Now, how you go home, that's another conversation. You can take that up with your clergy guest. But what I would tell you is, financially, a lot of our counterparts in other immigrant groups and things of that nature are passing wealth along using savings, using selling their business and handing it off, or using life insurance and those other tools. And then the really wealthy are just using the life insurance to pay the taxes on all the other wealth they're going to pass.
That's correct.
So there's always been this tool. So you hear the crazy stories about some of our famous individuals, and I wish I had come prepared because I give you names of folks that died without wills and died without life insurance. And so their wealth wasn't protected.
Wow,
that's where correct. The wealthy use life insurance for two things. One, to pay taxes on estate tax.
Okay.
So they keep the wealth.
Wow.
Number two, they use it for philanthropy.
Okay.
Because they can take a life insurance policy and give to their high school, their church, their place of worship, their college, or some other organization, and not have to touch the wealth that they're going to pass to their children. So the more you understand the tools, the better off you are. What we've got to learn to do is sacrifice a little bit of short-term cash flow to create wealth for tomorrow. Because every time you can set up your family, like my wife and I, we're trying to set up our daughters so that they start with a platform with some resources. Resources give you choices. Now, I'm not talking about for them to just go out and buy fancy cars and all that, and they may want to do that anyway. But resources means I can pick the job I want, not the job I have to take. Resources means I can take a couple years off and go to a grad school program because I can afford it. Resources mean that I can transfer wealth so that my grandchildren that don't exist yet for my daughters will already have college funds. Those are the kind of things that we need to talk about in our community. And so I almost believe like God put me in the financial world as a salesman. And I'm not a quant jock. I'm not the guy that do the spreadsheets and do all the math, but I can sell the concepts. Now, there's some young men and women in town that are doing it better. They're next level. So as you know, and you probably had some of them on your show that are really doing this, the current young crop that are in banks, in accounting, entrepreneurship, are having those conversations. And I know that we're trying to leverage them through the 100 Black Men and other organizations to make sure that these new generation of financial services professionals are communicating in ways that maybe our generation couldn't, to reach this next generation. So if they can be highly successful and they can manage those dollars.
Just get your opinion. This is just his opinion. You can take it or leave it. He's not telling you what to do or anything, but I'm going to ask him a question. Say you're an entrepreneur, you've been doing business. I'll give you a perfect good example. I've been doing business 25, 30 years or so, been doing pretty well at what I've been doing off and on. But say if you get to the point that you get in your later years and you think your retirement's down the road and it's time for you to really start looking at that, and you have money set aside and say, hey, I need to be putting things aside to move myself closer to retirement. What's some advice you would give on that?
Sometimes you need to sit down and do the math. What do I need to sustain my lifestyle and not have to go to work every day?
Okay.
And when do I want to do that? Is that 5 years? Is that 10 years? Is that 20 years away? And then you have to look at what assets do I have now that are creating income. You have this business, so it's creating income. What portion of that are you setting aside? Delayed gratification and deferral. How much of that income, maintaining your current lifestyle, can you set aside and not have to live off of it, not have to touch it, and let it grow? Then you can get with the professionals that are out there, and there are many. And we've got some really good Black professionals in insurance, in investments, in brokerage, and good accountants as well that can show you how to do this. Then you begin to look at different investments, whether some of it's in the marketplace. I'm not an expert on Bitcoin or any of those things, so I can't speak to that, but having a stock portfolio, having some in an emergency fund.
Annuities
are good for certain situations. What annuity does is gives an insurance wrapper around an investment that gives you a guaranteed income when you trigger that and use the annuity. It's almost like setting up your own pension.
Okay.
Because you remember a lot of our parents and even folks today, if you're like my wife that's been a prosecutor and a magistrate, she's been on the government side, she's got PRS. So PRS is an annuity. It's a retirement plan that when she's of retirement age, she'll get a check every month. And so that's what annuity does. It's like setting up your own pension. Okay. And so setting those things up now, but you've got to do the plan. And this is what planners do. Planners are as much about how much and when as to what to invest it in. And the how much and when is probably the most important thing that you got to figure out. That determines how much you can set aside to reach that goal.
And how much longer you got to work.
Right. How much longer you got to work. Right. And so, and what are you doing? So you got two things you can do. You can sell more ads for strategic moves so you get more sponsors, make more money. And of course, you're a political consultant, get more candidates that you help get elected. Or you can figure out, okay, what do I need to do to cut costs or manage my lifestyle? Do I do one vacation instead of three or whatever y'all do, right? You know? And Tracy and I have had to do that. My wife and I, we used to love cruising. So now we have to cut back because we focus on our daughters and we're going to bring that back.
Exactly.
Right. She's already got the list. Right? Here's where we're going. Okay, step it up, Tony. Step it up. So that's a very generalistic answer. But having a plan is the first thing. Secondly, if you're a business owner, you need to figure out what are you going to do with your business? Because your business will have some form of value. Your business is valued by the assets the business owns plus the revenue stream that it generates. So if your business is generating X number of dollars per year that you report to the IRS, here's how much my business is making. And then you've got to figure out, well, what is that worth? How do I replace that in? Do one of my children want to buy me out? Do I have a partner that'll buy me out? Do I just want to close it up and just walk away? And so there's a planning process for that. Or do I want to dabble in it part-time and bring other people in to keep it going so I still get a revenue stream? So those are the strategic things that your planning and accounting folks can do, as well as investment advisors, to help you look at what is the best tax strategy. But you have to be thinking about, what does that look like? It was a study done by two college professors around the habits of millionaires. And what they found out was the average millionaire was like someone that had like a plumbing business. That was driving like a Ford and shopping at Sears, but they were millionaires. And the lawyer and the banker like me, a BMW, right, had a nice home, wearing nice suits, had no money. So some of it is entrepreneurs, be about your business. Don't be about showing that you're in business. Right? Be about your business. Don't be about just acting and looking successful. Be successful. And we find it out in philanthropy, because then the people we think have a lot of money, they don't give. They don't give. They got a car note that's $800. When they pull up to the event, they look good. But I drive a Honda. I've always driven Hondas. I'm never going to drive an expensive car. I have no interest in it. Why? Because when it sits in my garage at night, it doesn't make me any money. And then my wife won't let me buy one anyway.
Exactly.
Tighter to me.
How important you think it is for young couples who just meeting each other, ready to get married, to have that discussion about what you bringing to the table and what I'm bringing to the table? You got a bunch of college debt, you got a bunch of this, you got that, or it is. Is that important?
I'm not a marriage counselor, so
this is our opinion.
This
is all our opinion.
I think having some understanding of not only what a person has when you get to that level of trust in a relationship, when you're moving toward, we're going to be together in some way, shape, or form. We're got children together, we're going to get married, or case may be. Is you got to have a little bit of understanding. Like when we got married, my wife had student loan debt from law school, whatever, and we understood that was going to be out there. But she wasn't saying I have to drive an expensive car. She's like, I like my Honda, so I'm good. I'd rather spend that on cruises, which I enjoy. So I think there's a point in time where you need to have that conversation. And I think that's a real test of relationship, because religion, money, there's certain things that's going to be the real test. Everything else is we're having fun. And, hey, baby, you look good, this, that, and third. I'm going to take you here. We're going to do this. But when you get to those real conversations, that's when you find out, is somebody honest? Is somebody comfortable disclosing to you? Is somebody willing to be transparent? Can you share the successes and the mistakes that you made? And it gives you a window into how they grew up and what they were exposed to. Because all of us didn't get to choose how we evolved from children to adults, but all that stuff that was kind of programmed into our heads by what we saw when we were growing up impacts how we are as adults in relationships and everything else. And I don't think it should be how much I make versus how much you make. Is what are we doing? Where do you want to be? Because there was a time when my wife was home with our children and I was the breadwinner. Now we're on the same footing. And then there's going to come a time when,
you never know,
hopefully
right?
if she gets elected and I'm retired or
Mhm,
whatever, hope she didn't listen to that. She's like, you ain't retired. We're going to be on the other side of that
Right,
fence.
right.
So having an agreed upon strategy going forward, but being able to talk about those tough conversations, and money is probably one.
How do you feel about prenups?
I don't have one, so I don't really know. I got married, I didn't have anything, so I didn't really have much to protect. So I don't really have a perspective on that. I guess if I was a millionaire athlete or banker or entrepreneur, somebody like yourself that's accumulated over time.
Yeah, right.
But fortunately, Tracy and I met when she was right out of law school. I was a manager at Fifth Third, and so we didn't have a lot. To me, it was just like we just ought to trust each other and get this thing going. We're in it to win it. We're not signing something that says we're not going to make it. Now, that doesn't always happen. So I would say from a legal and accounting and financial perspective, it's probably something that people that have a lot of assets would have to consider.
How soon do you think a couple should have a discussion about life insurance?
So I tell people that before you're a couple, you should have some life insurance. And if you're single, you should still have some life insurance. You may want to be a blessing to someone else. Because when I was single, I had a couple small policies. So my parents didn't have to pay to bury me. God forbid I had premature death. Secondly, I was able to have something in place that if something happened to me before I got engaged or whatever, that money would go to my sister or something, or go into a donation. So I think some of those tools you ought to have in place even before. But certainly when you get married or when you cohabitate or when you're building a family, you have children or whatever, as young people are doing today, if something happens to you, you need to make sure that you're leaving something financial behind. Doesn't take away the pain. It doesn't, but it's kind of the responsible thing to do. So that if something happened to me, my wife doesn't lose the house because my half of the income's gone, or my kids are mourning me and they're upset, but they can finish college because there's some money for college or whatever. So I think it's one of those tools that everyone should have in their portfolio, like having a will. I mean, how many times does somebody pass and you've got kids, but the kids are all like fighting over what's going on? You have a wife or you have a significant other or multiple situation, whatever the case may be. So these tools are not put in place for you. They're put in place as a love letter to the future of people you leave behind. So if you love them, try to put some things in place. So Tracy and I have a will. We have a bit of an estate plan. We're not wealthy by any stretch, but we've done okay. We've been blessed. And we've got coverages in place so that our house doesn't go into foreclosure if one of us passes, or if our kids need resources to continue their lives, because I don't get to live 90 to support them. That I'm there financially, even though I'm not there.
So let's talk about that, because my insurance, I had this dude named Hal Swarsky.
Okay.
Mr. Swarsky kept telling me that I didn't need to leave any money. He said the older I got, the less insurance I need. He was like, the older you get, the less insurance you need, because your kids get older. Your kids going to marry, go off and get their own life and go through their things. And he said, so why do you need to leave them a bunch of money behind? They should be doing their own thing. So he told that this was his idea. He said your kids should establish themselves and got them, and which brings everything down on mine, because he said you're paying for it. And that was his thing. Then you got others who believe that you should get a policy while you're young, because you can probably get a $2-3 million policy because you're for literally nothing.
You're very healthy. Right?
Because you're very healthy, you're very young, and you can carry that policy on most of your life. And then that'll be something that helps you generate wealth down the road.
I would love to have talked to your agent about what did he do for his family, right?
Right.
Because here's what happens. Some of our cultures in the United States are all about passing wealth to the next generation.
Correct.
So when they see a premium, it's an investment. It's not a bill.
Correct.
It's an investment. Because if I know that I can guarantee that each of my daughters at my funeral walks away knowing that they're going to have some resources, that helps my grandchildren that I never get to see, or whatever the case may be. So it's really a personal choice. Certainly if you're trying to reduce expenses, don't do it. And certainly if your kids are doing well and they don't need it. But what if they are doing well, but then they have another shot in the arm, because the day that you go home to the Lord, there's more resources for them. And if they don't need it, they put it away for their kids.
Gotcha.
Now you've created wealth for your grandchildren. Now you've passed it to the third generation. So I just think we got to change our mindset about that. Now, does it mean that you're going to spend $1,000 on a policy that you can't afford? No, but it means that if you can put something aside. And if you're a very good saver and your investments are growing, earmark those investments. When each of our parents died, there was either some insurance or some investments that passed on to Tracy and me, which we were able to kind of leverage for our situation. So I would love to talk to your agent and others.
I ended up
to
not
say,
sticking with Swarovski.
What are you? Because that's what I would ask. What are you doing for your kids? Are you just saying they're going to be okay, or are you going to add additional wealth? Because I mean, we live in the east side suburbs of Cleveland, and we're a nice area, right? We see people much younger than us buying these houses.
Correct.
Well, they're young. They're like they're in their 30s or early 40s, and they're buying these huge houses because they're inheriting. Now they're successful. They're making a lot of money. They're making six figures. They're in the banks. They're partners at law firms. They're this, they're that. But then on top of that, when grandma dies and papa dies, right, I'm getting some additional resources.
Right.
So now I can send all my kids to Hathaway Brown. I can send them to the US. I can do this. I can go to Martha's Vineyard every year, right? So we've got to make sure that we're trying to do something, even if it's a small scale. The allocation of resources, what Lou Stokes taught us when we were learning to do field work with Lou. Politics is about the allocation of resources. But if we're not part of that resource equation, which is why you see many organizations developing PACs in our community. We never had PACs before. When I came out of school, I was the PAC coordinator for Fifth Third Bank. But there weren't many Black PACs that I could collaborate with, but there was also PACs out there that were about certain issues. But they weren't PACs in our community.
So let's talk about philanthropy. If you wanted to do something like that, because I hear people do that all the time, what would you think you would need to start one of those?
I know that if you talk to the folks at the Cleveland Foundation, they've got this African American Philanthropy Summit, and they have the African American Philanthropy Committee. There's a certain level that, and I don't want to quote the amount. I think it's either $10,000 or $25,000. You can set up a gift annuity or something of that nature, or a donor advised fund where the Cleveland Foundation will manage it, but you get to kind of suggest how some of the dollars are used and things of that nature. Some people do it annually. Some people just give annually to their church, or they give an annual gift to their fraternity for their scholarship fund that happens every year. But I plan to leave some things philanthropically upon my demise. When the good Lord calls me home, I want to leave something that's intentional, that leaves a legacy. And you can do things while you're living so you can see the benefit of the philanthropy that you're having an impact on, and you can help guide it. And then leaving something so that you can make a difference. So
Correct.
It's, do I want to have an impact? Do I want to make something relevant for somebody else because I was blessed? You got to conquer the mindset first about, like we were talking about couples getting together on their finance, and philanthropy is the same thing. How are you building that mindset? And it's kind of a wealth mindset, because when you're generous, hands are open, stuff happens. And so what we're learning is that our community has always been generous. You can check with some of the folks that are working with this, talk to the folks in town that are really focused on philanthropy, Black philanthropy. Apparently, data shows that we as a community are more generous per capita.
I can agree. I
when
believe
you
that.
add up our churches, fraternal organizations, our community organizations, show up at these festivals in the community, business owners that are donating to make these things happen. There are folks that are creating scholarships for kids. They have 100 Black men. We raise money, and there's people that'll just say, I can't come to any meetings, but here's a check.
You know, it's just funny because when you hear the word philanthropy or philanthropist, you think millions of dollars, you think really big, you think about the poor African-American kids over there starving to death and that kind of thing. But philanthropy can be looked at in all kinds of ways, you know.
And we have a several 100-year history of benevolent societies, not just the fraternities and the Masonic orders and the Elks and the other groups that have evolved over the years in the Black community. We've always been benevolent, not just the church. We've always been benevolent to the extent that we've always pooled resources to help each other. And we got to talk about that. We got to understand the history of that.
So at Case, that's basically what you do at Case.
Right. So I focus on the corporate sector. So I meet with corporate chief HR officers and the chief diversity officers and other executives in the corporate world to get companies that may want to put their name on a building or may want to invest in some research. We've been having conversations with some of the health organizations around investing in the research we're doing around health equity at the med school, dental school, and the nursing school. I just had a couple of meetings with some of the local banks about investing in scholarships for more minority talent. So, for example, we have a program called the North Star Graduate Award, where we recruit students to get master's degrees and other advanced degrees or graduate degrees at Case Western Reserve. Pipeline of recruiting and admitting students who are HBCU grads. And if they're an HBCU grad and they are admitted, we can discount that advanced degree, but we're trying to get some of the corporate partners to kind of match that. So I can come to Cleveland, I can work for such and such a bank or such and such a manufacturer, get a master's in data science or MBA and get it at a discount, and the company may match it. Then we have alumni at companies that work with it. So I'm on the corporate side. Now we have other folks that are in our advancement group, and all the universities have similar structures that just call on individuals.
Okay.
So you have some professionals that are directors or different titles, but they're calling on alumni directly. So they're calling you up and taking you and your wife to lunch and saying, hey, would you consider a scholarship for people that are going to be in public policy or some of the things that you're interested in or whatever? Or would you support our Social Justice Institute, or would you support our Office of Multicultural Affairs? Would you be a donor because you went to Case Western or you went to such a school? So I get calls from I did maybe at Baldwin Wallace. I get a call from them. I get a call from Duke. And will you give back? But it's no different than what you hear in your place of worship. You know, it's no different than some of our other nonprofit organizations like NCP or the Urban League, some of our other organizations where we're trying to raise dollars to have an impact. And that's part of philanthropy. That's when you have an individual says, I'll buy a table at the Freedom Fund dinner. That's
the diversity advancement piece of that.
So my title is Director of Corporate Relations. I'm one of the directors in the Department of Corporate Relations. So a lot of my portfolio is the financial services industry because that's where I came from. And I do a lot of work with the Weatherhead School of Management, raising money for them and connecting them with corporate opportunities. But previous to me, there were several folks that held a position in our corporate relations office that focused on funding for diversity. I don't do the diversity programs. We have professionals that do that. I try to raise money for those programs.
Okay.
Like a sports agent, right? I've got these superstar athletes who are the staff and the faculty at Case that are doing certain things, particularly in diversity, although I do cover some other areas. And I'm trying to find them shoe contracts. I'm trying to find who will fund what they're working on. And so my experience as a banker and as a philanthropist, I've served on the City Club Forum Foundation, other things. I'm a trustee of US where we raise a lot of money. So I learned how to raise money as a volunteer. And now I'm using it both as a profession. So it's a lot of fun because I see the result of being successful. If I can get something funded, that means it survives. That means it continues. Someone doesn't say, well, we have to cancel that program because we don't have enough money to pay for the staff, or we don't have enough resources to make it accessible to those who may not be able to afford it.
You know, it's a true behind the scenes job.
It is.
It's the man behind the program that nobody never knows your work.
Well, yeah, it's just
they just think it's just keep going on and on. I had Cecil Lipkin on the show.
Oh, okay, good.
And Cecil talked about philanthropy and all the stuff that he's doing over there. And like you say, man, it's yeoman's work. It's behind the scenes. If you had to explain it to somebody almost like what you do, they'll get it, but they really don't. It's a really big responsibility.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm a member of a group called African American Development Officers. And the development officer is a fundraiser. And they could be in a nonprofit, they can be in a college, they can be in a lot of different scenarios. And we're a national organization, and there's about several thousand of us, and we do webinars and workshops. And then we have a men of color group. There's a lot of brothers that are in our space, like Cecil, that are working in this space, because we know that capital always seeks assets. So capital is sitting on the sideline. It needs to be invested in something that creates a return. So what we're trying to do is identify those things in our community from a diversity perspective that can move the needle and have an impact, and figure out how to get wealth and resources connected with those programs.
We have to do more in our community to try to get more people around the idea of what it takes to do that, and to organizations such as United Black Fund and others that are out there doing those type of programs and those type of things. So I really appreciate the fact that you guys are doing it. I know it couldn't be many brothers and sisters.
I served on United Black Fund board for a while and have served on some other boards. And that's how I learned fundraising before I got into it as a profession when I joined Case 4 years ago. But I think one, transparency, helping people understand how money works and how resources help organizations survive. Two, having the highest amount of integrity. So when you do raise money, you need to know that that organization is going to be a great steward of those dollars, and it's going to be high integrity, because the distrust is what creates people not wanting to give. They say, well, we raised all that money and they went and did this and they went and did that, or the CEO did this, or the executive director went on a cruise or whatever. So having that credibility, I think, is important, and that transparency. And then just helping people to understand that if you've been blessed, find a way within your means, and no material harm to your family or anything like that, to give a little bit back and make a difference.
So this is what we're going to do, man. We're at the end of our program. Thank you again for coming out to our show. I really appreciate you. You gave us some information that we can pass on to our millions and millions of viewers out there that's listening. But what I'm gonna give you this camera right here. You can take your time, talk about what's going on. 100 Black men. If there's something at case or anything you got so much stuff going on. Anything that you want to talk about that you think you want the listeners to hear or bring to their attention, by all means, it's on you.
I appreciate it. First of all, I appreciate the opportunity to come on your show and to share a little bit about my experience. Hopefully, it bless somebody. I'm at the point where I'm really concerned about collaboration and finding ways that if we're all committed to improving our community, but we all have different talents, different skills. So I'm trying to stay in my lane, if you will, and contribute what I have. But I want to make sure that we build camaraderie and trust and then collaborate, whether it's the fund development space that I'm in, or whether it's working with the fraternal organizations, of which I'm with a few, the 100 Black Men, Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity, and of course, Prince Hall Masonry, whether it's our church community. How can we work together, each of us taking the part that we're best at, everyone kind of knowing their role and playing their position to improve our communities. And what I appreciate about you, Ken, is the work that you're doing with this platform. Is you're exposing that there's a lot of diversity of skills and talents and gifts amongst our folks. And how do we then start talking to each other in ways that we haven't in the past to move the needle forward, make community better for all of us. So it's a blessing to be on your show. And hopefully I was in some small way, I blessed somebody else. Thank you.
Oh, thank you again for coming on our show. And listen, if you see this program or you like any of the other things about philanthropy or any of our other programs, please tune in. We have another show on the line we did with Cecil Lipcomb, and we talked about philanthropy as well. We had Sheila Wright on. We talked about a little development, and we just did a program with Julius Cartwright, and we talked about development as well as entrepreneurship. So look at any of those shows, tune in, and hit the subscribe button at the end of this program. Thanks for tuning in. All right, brother.